Hello everybody. It is day 2 of tiling here. We're just getting the rest of everything set up, ready to go. And we're gonna stitch today, and we'll talk you through some of the fun things you might need to know as you're making a tiling scene. It is Friday. I'm super excited. We're gonna stitch almost the same thing on 2 machines. It's gonna be a race. See which one can stitch what faster. Because I thought that would be fun. It might be a really loud video today. Okay, so first things first, Dawn has starched this fabric. It's quite firm. So instead of being soft and squishy, it's not quite rock hard, but it's getting there. So the tiling scenes have a lot of stitching in them, and the less give your fabric has as it goes, the less likely you are to have puckers. So it's all about stabilizing properly. And part of that on this particular project is starch, and then we're going to add some fusible woven to the back of the fabric to give it more structure. So this is an interfacing. It's from OESD, so it looks a whole lot like a stabilizer, but it is indeed an interfacing. And it would like to be applied just with a medium iron for 10 to 12 seconds. The really nice thing about these tiling scenes, lots of their blocks are fit in a 5x7 hoop. So no machine envy here unless you're jealous once you see how the 10 needle runs. Because I'm going to be able to do all sorts of things while Gwen sits and changes threads for at the other machine today. Fusible woven on the back of this piece of fabric. This is just like a cream tone-on-tone fabric. I think it'll look nice in the background of my piece. So the fusible woven is just going to keep this from puckering as it sews. It's going to help you immensely. It's not really stiff with the fusible woven on it, but it is definitely not the soft and crumply as a quilting cotton normally is. Set that off to the side, and let's hoop this. So because I'm running on 2 machines today, I'm going to hoop 2 times. Ooh, that's really super close. Oops. Just fine. Fabric with fusible woven and a piece of heavy cutaway stabilizer. And then we're going to make these 2 friends. Come to my secret my secret spray station with me. So Anne's top secret method for doing this. This is like a sealing grate or a sealing tile. It works really well to starch or to spray fusible adhesives onto the back. We want all these layers to stick together as best we can. We don't need to overspray, but the garbage cans underneath will catch the spray. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to keep the fabric down wrong side up, and I'm going to put the stabilizer on top, and then I'm going to smooth the stabilizer and get it firmly adhered to the back of my fabric like that, and then they're friends. It'll make hooping a whole bunch easier. And then when we go to hoop this, we're going to put the inner hoop on top of the fabric, and then we'll set that down in our outer hoop. And when you're cutting stabilizer, you want to be about 1 inch bigger all the way around on your stabilizer than your hoop is, so that you have space for your hoop to go in on your machine, or for your inner hoop to fit inside your outer hoop. And then this is the hoop for the multi-needle. So it actually has 2 screws on it, but it's tight but not like a drum. Trying some embroidery before jumping all the way in is often really great. Okay, so hoop 1 is ready to go, and it's got stabilizer and fabric and fusible woven. You don't want to be pulling on your fabric. You don't want to put a warp in it that's unnecessary. So just set it down in. It's going to stay friends with your stabilizer and not be stretched. We'll go find the design. We'll get this started on one machine, and then we'll go get the other machine fired up and It'll be wonderfully noisy for a few minutes, guys. We're gonna open a design that's on my USB stick. So if I start back from home and go embroidery, USB, or I'm opening something from the OESD event, or OESD design card. 12570, which is my whitetail buck tiling scene. And I'm going to do the face. That's the block we're going to do on this one. I believe there's 2 sizes in this particular tiling scene. So I'm actually going to do the smaller one on this machine and the bigger one on the bigger machine. And we're going to race, because we actually have to do all the thread changes on this machine. So we'll go in and find the block we want. I would like to do that one, which is 10 on here. We'll hit set. And then just so we don't have sideways deer while we stitch, I'm going to rotate this. That makes more sense to me. Because I'm making the smaller of these 2 blocks, there is definitely a chance that I'll be able to get 2 of this block in this bigger, longer hoop that I'm using. So I'm going to move my design up to start with. And I can probably go all the way up to the top. Embroidery. Whoop, I'm too high for this one. Okay. This says 64 minutes. Goodness gracious. I wonder if the speed is turned all the way up on here. Oh no, it's not. So we're going to stitch this at full speed because that's way more fun. It'll bring our stitching time way down. And under layout, I'm also going to add a basting box. So a basting box on here is just going to be an outline stitch that will stitch around our first. It'll hold the stabilizer to the fabric. So I'm ready with color 1 for this block. So come for a visit. We're also going to play on the 1050. There's a needle threader that you can use and move on each needle on this machine, which is lovely. So we'll tell this machine we want to go to thread 1. And there's a little thread guide up at the top by the needle. So the work on the multi-needle here is all set up at the beginning. I've got 1 through 5 coming through. Yes. Get everything threaded here, and we'll get stitching soon. Once this is threaded, super duper easy to keep going. Just this beginning part always takes a few minutes. But on this tiling scene design, most of these colors are used repeatedly. So I could thread it once and probably have it threaded with almost all the colors I need for almost all the blocks. This is the kind of embroidery where I would be quite comfortable to set up my 10 needle and walk away and sew on my other machine. Okay, so when I was choosing how these threads were going to be laid out, before we get to the final step of actually hitting go on either machine, I'm using the thread chart that came with the design. So on the big machine, I'm stitching block 2, and Gwen is stitching block 10, or tile 2. So what I've done here is loaded the colors in order that they will stitch, and those are the OESD thread color numbers. So both machines are starting with color 0230. Whew, we got them threaded. We got it done. Okay, so both machines have hoops ready. So heavyweight cutaway stabilizer. Okay, that one clicks on there. I have the extension table on here to help support this bigger hoop as it stitches. And I'm actually just going to move this over to the side in this hoop, because I don't need to use the, oh no, maybe I'll add a basting box. Then I'll move it over. I'll move it over quickly, right to the edge of that hoop. And then I'll probably have enough fabric to do another one when I get home. So we're gonna make deer faces. And I'm making the one with 30,000 stitches, and the machine run time is 45 minutes. And Gwen is making the smaller version of the same thing at 22,000 stitches, and her machine run time is 30 minutes. So you guys get to vote which machine will be done faster, because we get to do thread changes on the domestic. And the big one's already all threaded. So it's a stitch off. We're on.
All right.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. So both machines are starting with a basting box. I'm quite comfortable with how these two machines are set up and how they're hooped to walk away. I wouldn't leave the house, and I probably wouldn't go upstairs and make dinner, but I would definitely move to the other side of the room and sew on my other sewing machine. Okay, Gwen, you're falling behind already. You have to hit go again. Oh, she's getting the next color ready. You're on to your next color. Gwen's on to the next one. She'll be okay in a moment. So on your domestic machines, if you don't have space for a 10 needle or the budget for a 10 needle, it's still getting a thread stand to sit behind your machine. You can lay out your 10 threads in order, which will help keep you organized as you get started. Auto-regulate their speed, so as if the stitch needs more thread in it, the machine will slow down. So something like a satin stitch will stitch slower than a tight little running stitch. And right now I have the speed turned all the way up on this guy, so it will max out at 1,000 stitches per minute when it can. And the things you're seeing on screen right now, there's 39 minutes remaining in the stitch out. We're on color 3 of 14. We're at stitch 4,000 and some, and we're 5 minutes into the 45-minute embroidery. It's showing me here it's gonna just pull from each spool in order, but I did put the colors on in the order that I need them. And the other one's off to the races too. I didn't sabotage you, I promise. We heard that. Okay, but we're gonna do some teaching.
Oh my.
Okay.
Oh my.
So sometimes, even with lots of experience, things go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
This is shredded thread.
Yeah.
Usually the cause of this is
like there better.
Usually the cause of shredded thread when it does something like that and makes itself a horrible caterpillar is a needle that needs to be changed.
Okay.
So easiest way to resolve that kind of issue is a new needle. And as much as you think you've got this all under control every day, it happens to all of us sometimes. But on these machines, even if things go horribly wrong, oh, maybe you should adjust that needle further.
See, she did sabotage me because now I even have to use my own fingers and tweezers to thread the machine. There's tweezers right there if it helps.
But we can show them how to back up through a design to go back over.
Absolutely. That's a really good learning thing.
We make mistakes on purpose just so you guys can learn
It's
from
all
us.
learning. Yeah, you gotta learn.
Okay, so on this design, right now the crosshairs on screen are showing where we actually stopped it. But we're gonna back up. We started having issues nearly at the beginning of this color.
Yeah, we really did.
So you have a plus minus icon on screen. And I'm actually just gonna go back to the beginning of this color and start fresh on it and go back over it. You could move through single stitch by single stitch, but I think we'll just go back to the beginning of this color. And then usually a new needle and we're much happier. So I think what's happened, there was a bit of a burr on the needle.
Okay.
Needles only have a sewing lifespan of about 8 hours of stitching. So on something like this, you might get a couple blocks out and then it might be time for a new needle. Change your needles more often is my tech tip of Friday.
There you go.
Roughly out of 1,000 meters of thread, so our Isacord spools are 1,000 meters, you can get 200,000 stitches. It's a weird conversion when you start needing a whole bunch of thread on a whole bunch of blocks and only like little bits of blue or little bits of green. But roughly 200,000 stitches you'll get out of 1,000 meters of thread. Thread for OESD designs. The thread charts will be in Isacord numbers, which comes on the green spool, in either the 1,000 meter cones or the 5,000. Like white, I buy in 5,000 meter cones. But if it's a color you don't need very much of, or we don't have stock on the Isacord, the Metler Poly Sheet is the same thread and the same dye lots and the same colors. So completely interchangeable. This one's about $8 a spool and this one's about $4. So you can get just 200 meters, 1,000, or the 5,000 meter cones, all in the same thread. So colors I don't need very often, I buy in those little ones. This machine's on color 9 out of 14. We're 22,000 stitches in, 28 out of 45 minutes. So just 17 more minutes of watching us embroider. But you guys seem to be of the consensus that an embroidery channel would be okay. taking a block. So this would all be in one stitch out. This would all be in one stitch out. Just rethread. It will be okay. We've got a big mess. Okay guys, more learning to be done today. What to do when you have an epic embroidery mess. You're getting treasures like this. Your thread's not in the tension unit. It's usually what that means. Or it does not have enough tension. I am pretty much stitched to the stitch plate, guys. Very successfully, Gwen is going to pull into the lead. Gwen might win, even though I sabotaged her. I'm trying to teach you guys all the troubleshooting and problem-solving things you can do for embroidery. And this current step is currently trying to remove my embroidery from my stitch plate. If this was on a different machine, I might be able to take the stitch plate off, still attached, but I can't get a screwdriver in here without taking my whole thing apart. So this rat's nest that's in my stitch hole here is not what you want in your machine. When it sounded weird the first time, we should have stopped and studied it more thoroughly. This is not a reason to panic and cry. This is a deep breath. Use the tools at your disposal. On a domestic machine, you might need a screwdriver to get your stitch plate off, you might not. But at this point, I would say taking the stitch plate off is probably our best option. And this is what happens when you don't have upper tension and you start doing embroidery. That's what we cut off the back. There's not a hole in the fabric though, so I think we're okay. Deep breath, no panic. That's my rule for this. And there's the nest from out of the stitch plate. Much easier to deal with when the stitch plate is off. Then we'll put it back together and regroup. It'll all be just fine. Gwen, are you pulling into the lead?
Well, I'm moving along anyway.
Before you get stitching again, we're just going to make sure that all the threads are cleared out of the system. Rethread the top and the bottom. Clearly we should have done that before hitting go again on this color anyway. The other thing to be careful of on these multi-needles is that you put your hoop back on the right way. They can rotate 180 degrees. Just make sure that your block is still aligned with the direction that you put it in the first time. Hoop is back on. We're going to back up and go back over my little nose because it's all gone. So the black for the nose is that all black? Yeah. I was right at the beginning of that color. And this time, if it sounds weird, we're going to stop right away. Your audio clues while you're doing embroidery are key. Oh, that looks better. Yes, it does. Nice. Ooh, look at the antlers too. Cool. And our dueling embroidery machines. Gwen's got the background color on her antlers too. Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Oh, it shifted. Okay, guys. Due to unforeseen circumstances of everything going a little sideways on this today, my outline stitching on my antler is not lined up. So I have two choices at this point. Embroidery doesn't pick out very well, but I could possibly realign this. Probably what happened is when it got stuck, it pulled the arm and it lost count of steps. So I'm going to cut the thread, and then if this happens where partway through design things go horribly sideways and your design is not lined up after, let's do more learning of how to fix these things. I would say take your machine and reboot it. So if things go horribly wrong, turn your machine off and back on. It will recalibrate your arm, and most machines remember where they were. But I'm going to keep going from where it was. Rebooting should have it realigned with where it should be. And then we might have to regroup and do this all over again at home. But it is realigned in the right place. So on this machine, it just cycled back to the color it was before. I actually want the dark brown that I have on number 4, so I can use what's called the magic wand to tell it I would like to stitch that from thread 4. So the final stitch on this is an outline block that will be used for squaring up and trimming when we're all done. Final boundary. I've also got a basting box on there. That'll be in the seam allowance when we're done, so it's not a big deal. Happy embroidery noises. And a only slightly wonky deer. So. There we go. One block done. Gwen is just minutes from being done hers. And this, I will remake this block because this will bother me indefinitely and I don't want to pick it out where the ears don't line up and the nose doesn't line up. On other designs you might not notice something like that. On here it's pretty obvious because it is an outline stitch. And you're on your second last color.
Second last color. Yep.
Use white-tailed buck tiling seam. And you can make it with that fancy border or without. I'm going to make the fancy border. Don found some really great brown fabric for me.
Nice.
Probably what I would do next is press this into an OESD pressing cloth if it was puckered at all after coming out of the hoop. Good learning opportunity all around.
Right.
So I don't know if either of us won this competition.
I think we both lost. No kidding.
We're gonna go with we both lost today.
Yep.
But we both have a finished deer.
That's right. There we go. Let's trim that last thread.
If you're having a moment like this,
And there he is.
where it's all going super sideways, maybe it's time to walk away.
Yep.
And turn it off for the night and regroup.
There we go.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like
he's
the darker
all right.
colors. Yeah.
He's all right. Yeah, you betcha.
Thank you, Gwen.
All right, thank you.
Do you want to say bye with me?
Goodbye. Hope everyone has
Bye.
a great weekend.
Thanks.
Take care.
Be safe, be kind, be calm. Stay home and isolate.
Bye.